Hey, I'm Rachel Kugel. I'm the owner and founder of the Kugel Law Firm, where we focus on DWI defense. We don't judge you, we don't lecture you, we defend you. And I'm here today answering some frequently asked questions that I get about New Jersey DWI defense. So let's jump right in. The first question for today is, what are the penalties for a New Jersey DWI? And the answer is, it depends. In order to really give you a sense of the penalties that you're facing on a New Jersey DWI, we need to know a couple of things because it's based on a couple of different factors. So the first thing is, what is the level of offense? Are we dealing with a first, second, or third offense? The second is, what is the basis for the DWI charge? Are we dealing with a case in which the client has a 0.08 or more? And if so, what is that number? Is it 0.08 to 0.10? Is it 0.10 to 0.14? Or is it 0.15 and above? Instead, is it based on the consumption of some kind of drugs, either prescription or illicit drugs? Or is it a refusal in which the person did not submit to a chemical test at all? So we need to know what the level of offense is and what is the basis for the charge that that client is facing. Once we know those two factors, we can give you a sense of what the penalties are and what the total exposure might be for you or your loved one in your particular case. But just to give you a sense of it today, if we know these two pieces of information, the reason we can accurately predict it is because the penalties in New Jersey are dependent on those pieces of information, and the full exposure is dependent on those pieces of information. So, for example, the biggest range is going to be actually on a first offense. On a first offense, depending on the reading, the penalties you face can vary. So, for example, and I'm looking at the statute right now just so I get all the numbers right for you, the biggest range is going to be on that first offense, 0.08 to 0.09. An individual is going to face an indefinite forfeiture of their license until they install an ignition interlock device. Once they install that device, they're going to be required to have it for a period of 90 days. And during that time, as long as they have the device installed, they can drive. If the individual doesn't have a vehicle, then they can ask for a definite term of suspension of 90 days instead. Now, if the reading is higher than 0.09, so if it's 0.10, but less than 0.15, so 0.10 to 0.14, they face similar penalties. The difference being is that the ignition interlock device would have to remain installed for a period of at least 7 months. And then anything above 0.15 is going to trigger the requirement of a suspension as well as an ignition interlock device. And that suspension would be for a period of at least 4 months, plus the ignition interlock device is also required on anything 0.15 or above. So just to give you a sense of that range, you can see that on a first offense, depending on what the breath test reading is going to really depend on what the exposure is. Now, if someone's facing a second offense, there is a definite term of license suspension, and that ranges from 1 to 2 years. And there is a definite term of ignition interlock device during that time and for a period of 2 to 4 years thereafter. There's also the requirement for community service, as well as the requirement for a potential jail term of 2 to 90 days. On a third offense, someone faces a 8-year license revocation, as well as an ignition interlock device for 2 to 4 years thereafter. So ignition interlock during the 8 years, plus 2 to 4 years thereafter. That's in addition to the mandatory requirement, and this is sort of the worst thing on the third or subsequent offense, of a 6-month incarceration component. All of this is in addition to fines and surcharges and things of that nature, as well as a class and assessment at the IDRC, or Intoxicated Driver Resource Center. So this is just to give you a broad overview of a range of what you could be facing and what New Jersey requires as a mandatory penalty. But you can see that it's complicated, and it really does depend on you sitting down with an attorney and figuring out those couple of factors, right? What is the level of offense, first, second, or third? And what is the basis for the offense? Alcohol, drugs, a reading, no reading. And we need to know these things in order to adequately advise you of the penalties that you face. So it's complicated is the short answer. So give us a call. We'd be more than happy to, for no cost, work with you on figuring this out and hopefully being able to give you a sense of what you're facing. And we're happy to do that at any time. Feel free to reach out for that.